Hi, I'm Peter Tragos, host of the Lawyer You Know podcast and YouTube channel. The saying goes, everyone hates lawyers until you need one. Well, I'm here when you need one to answer your questions and give you insight that you didn't know you needed. Along with my partners, Pete Sardis, the professor, who has a finance and business background, and George Tragos, my dad, and the consigliere, a criminal defense giant, we can answer any questions you have. What's up, everybody? It's a last minute late night live. A little tongue twister there, but it's going to be a fun one. We're going to watch this interview together that Camille and Ben did for the Beverly Hills Bar Association. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. I watched bits and pieces of it today, kind of as it was going on. Some of you saw I was in the chat for a little while. It is as honest as I've seen them in any interview. It is very telling. We learned, I feel like, more from this interview, and I didn't even see it all, but we learned more from this interview than I saw on any of their other interviews they did on any other news station. So if you haven't watched it yet, you're in for a treat. And if you have watched it, this time you're going to get to do it with me live. So it's going to be fun. I know a lot of other people are doing lives right now, lawyers talking about legal topics. So that's cool. If some of you are coming from over there, or some of you watch this later after you're done with their lives, that's cool. I just have random times I can do this. And today's been an insane week. And next week's going to be more of the same. So let's get into this interview without further ado. If you haven't subscribed to our page, take a second and subscribe. Like this video if you are here for this Johnny Depp Amber Heard content and you just keep grinding away at it. This is a fun one, though. This is kind of a happy one. No somber topics or really any negativity in this one. I think it's just really interesting and kind of a fun watch together. So let's get to it. Have I not done this on this computer yet? This must be the first time. I believe it is. All right, let's see if this lets us do it now. Yes, it will. All right, and away we go.
Program. I know you've all been waiting for it. This is Lunch with Johnny Depp's attorneys, Benjamin Chu and Camille Vasquez, hosted by the president of the Beverly Hills Bar Association, Anthony Ross. I hope you all enjoy today's program, and over to you, Anthony.
Thank you, Chelsea, for not only a wonderful introduction, but for reminding me of the wonderful support of our members, and also the importance of Beverly Hills Bar Association in helping to support the next generation of attorneys. Now, whether you're watching us on Zoom or on YouTube, welcome. Welcome to Lunch with Johnny Depp's attorneys, Benjamin Chu and Camille Vasquez. I'm Tony Ross, president of the Beverly Hills Bar Association. I'm very grateful for that today's guests could join us. And so thank you both. I am just going to launch right in. We have not much time, so I just want to get as much as we can get. So first person I think I will ask Ben. Ben, when you got into litigation, did you ever think that you would be representing A-list celebrities, or was that really your goal to do entertainment law?
Tony, first, thank you very much for hosting Camille and me. It's a great honor to appear with you and before your wonderful members. No, I have to be honest and say it was neither my expectation nor my aspiration to represent A-list celebrities. I was just someone who was very interested in litigation, and I just fortunately had the opportunity to represent. First, I represented Cher, and then I had the opportunity to represent Johnny, which has been a great honor and a pleasure.
When you represented Cher, what was that first meeting like?
The first meeting was a little bit nervous-making. It actually was not a direct representation of her, but a representation of a pro bono client in Virginia. It later became the subject of a documentary called Edith and Eddie. It was a love story of an elderly couple. Cher had heard about this couple on the news. Ironically, she heard about it on the Los Angeles news, but it was a couple who lived right outside of Washington. and one of them needed legal representation. And through a friend, she contacted me, and I agreed to, of course, do it pro bono. And that was a very rewarding representation.
Wow, nice. Camille, can you tell me how life has changed since you've taken it?
So it was interesting. I didn't hear that part in the first part. That's something I missed in the interview, but it's funny to think like celebrities ask lawyers to do pro bono work for people. That's true. I've heard that happening. I don't have a lot of celebrity clients or anything like that. I'm far from some lawyer to the stars. I've represented a couple of professional athletes because of a mutual friends. And it is funny that they always have a friend they want you to do some pro bono work for. So it's funny how celebrities do that. And that's kind of what he was saying for Cher too. It's just kind of funny. But does any lawyer say they go into being a lawyer to try to be a celebrity lawyer or a lawyer to the stars? I don't know if I've ever heard anybody say that was their goal. But yeah, I mean, I think he's just, the way he answers these questions is so awesome throughout and so fun. It makes him even more likable. Same thing with Camille. But Ben Chu, I mean, he's such a good dude. Like, you can just kind of get that from this interview.
This case?
Well, I think life has really changed. But some things have remained the same, right? I mean, I'm obviously very close to my family. I enjoy doing legal work, good legal work. I enjoy working with my colleagues and especially Ben, obviously. And but life has become a little less private, a bit more, you know, I feel like there's parts of my life now that I have a responsibility to share with fans or people, especially young women that have come forward and said, you know, thank you for being an inspiration and thanks for getting me through a hard time or pushing me to go back to school. And I feel a huge sense of responsibility to them and to continue doing good work and be a source of inspiration for them.
When did you know, Camille, when did you decide that you wanted to be a lawyer?
I mean, I feel like the decision was sort of made for me. I joke. I come from a Hispanic background. My mom is Cuban, my father is Colombian, and they said to my sister and me as we grew up that we were going to be professionals, right? That they weren't going to leave us with a lot, but our educations. And so they said, you get to be a doctor or a lawyer, so pick one. And my sister became the doctor and I became the lawyer. But I wasn't particularly great at math and science. And
That's funny because that's actually, I know a lot of families like that, where it's like doctor, lawyer, accountant, and it's certain parents push their kids towards that, which I always think is funny. So that's really awesome to hear she comes from a family like that. I think that's fun.
you know, like a lot of lawyers that are afraid of Excel spreadsheets or math.
Right.
You know, I felt like the arts and the liberal arts were much more in my wheelhouse. So I probably really started thinking about it seriously in high school.
Yeah, I'm one of those who can't do math and science either. And yeah, that's why I think I ended up, although I love it as well.
Yes.
Ben?
I love math, and this is just kind of sidetrack. I love math and science. I was probably better at math and science than liberal arts. I don't consider myself artsy at all. So it is kind of funny. I mean, I always like, speech meet and stuff like that and putting on presentations. But I like math and science. And a lot of what I do is science, like talking to these experts and crossing these experts and looking into the medical records and medicine. So I actually do love science and math.
Camille just made me think of something. She mentioned that, the arts, and they often say that a lot of what we do, trial lawyers in particular, is you're putting on a show. Ben, do you agree with that? And do you have examples of how you do that?
I completely agree with you on that, Tony. And one of the things in planning this trial, which ended up being quite a long trial, at least by Virginia standards, of 6 weeks, we thought that we needed to not so much entertain the jury, but to tell them a compelling story. So we gave a lot of thought. And again, I give Camille and others on the team primary credit for this.
And so this is important to think about because a 6-week trial is a long trial. Most trials, I would say, in the civil justice system, criminal justice system, are a week or less. So a 6-week trial is a long time. So they thought about that. They did not want to bore the jury. They wanted to put on a good presentation. They wanted to call as many witnesses as they can live, and they wanted to tell a story. And I think that's important. And it's good to know they had that strategy going in. And while parts were very boring, some parts were really enthralling and great to watch and listen to, like certain witnesses. So I think it's very interesting that, that was their plan and they thought about it and they really didn't want to bore this jury.
They were thinking thematically and how best to put the story in a compelling way. And I think one thing that we decided early on was to kind of begin at the beginning, to tell something about Johnny's story, to tell them enough about his life growing up that they could better put into context his story about the events at issue in the case, because they really had a bearing. His background had a real bearing on how he reacted to things that happened in his relationship with Ms. Heard. And I think we were able to, the witnesses were really able to kind of set the table. So by the time that Mr. Depp started speaking, I think the jury was prepared to understand the context.
Got it. I guess I'll throw this one to Camille. I often say that movies and television do us a disservice because they make trials, look like they happen in 2 or 3 days, and everything happens quickly. This was a long trial. Do you think, Camille, that it was instructive for the layman who was watching? Do you think that cameras in the courtroom, for example, are help?
I think they definitely can be, right? I mean, it's another factor that we as trial.
What do you guys think? After watching this trial live, a lot of you, are members. Speaking of that, you can join the membership. The link's in the video description. But a lot of you are members and you were here for our favorite, and we discussed our top 10 favorite legal movies. Later, we're going to do our top 10 favorite legal shows. Do you think this trial was way different than what you've seen in movies and shows? Do you think there were some similarities? What did you think? Just as lay people that aren't lawyers, was there a stark contrast to you all with how you watched legal shows or movies and how you watched his trials? Was it similar? Was it different? Let me know what you think in the chat. If you're part of the rewatch crew, let me know what you think in the comments, because I am interested, because he says it does it a disservice, and I know we lawyers have a certain mindset and feeling towards how it's portrayed in movies and shows besides real life, which I would argue this trial is almost not like real life. But let me know what you think in the comments as we listen to her answer about cameras in the courtroom.
Lawyers have to consider when preparing the case, but I think it's definitely instructive and educational. I had a lot of people have approached and said, I now know what lawyers do, and I know what you do. I know I've had also people say, parents that are lawyers say, oh, my kids finally sort of understand what I do. They've asked like, hey, Dad, what's objection hearsay mean? Or what's objection relevance mean? And,
right.
And I think because of
and obviously a lot of you and a lot of my friends on YouTube and in real life did the same exact thing, asking, what does this mean? Why is this not coming in? Things like that. Very interesting and funny.
The trial, people took a real interest in what we were saying and what was happening and why the court was ruling in certain ways. And I think it was a crash course in what trial lawyers really do for a living.
Thank you. I agree with you. Let's see. It doesn't matter who answers this question. I'm just curious. So I recognize, social media became a thing. It really around this case. I mean, that's happened before. It really just becomes a force unto itself. Did that so much attention on social media? Did that make you pivot the strategy at all? Did it have any effect on how you guys were approaching it?
Their answer to this pretty much has to be no. But we'll see.
Case?
No, I mean, I don't think so. We really lived in a bubble during the trial, and we have no reason to believe the jury acted in the same exact way, right? I mean, we had a job to do. We had very little time to do much of anything but work. And that time that we did have, it was to sleep. I do think, though, that, we started noticing that this was kind of taking on a life of its own, probably midway through the trial. Our hotel was attached to a mall, and I went to grab a coffee one morning over the weekend, and this sweet young girl with like braces, said my name and then handed me my coffee, and she looked at me and she went like this in like the cutest way. And I thought, oh God, do I have something like on my face? And then she said, "You're Johnny Depp's lawyer." And I was like, how do you know that? So, but no, it really didn't play a role in our strategy at all. I mean, obviously the fact that there were cameras in the courtroom, that was something that we knew. But I don't even think that played much of a role, at least in how we did our jobs. I don't know if Ben feels differently.
No, I feel the same way. And I was mortally afraid of hearing the critique of any of my performances. So I stayed away from it. And after a couple of weeks, it's not that we forgot that.
He's just the best, isn't he? I mean, he just literally makes you smile as you listen to him. His self-deprecating kind of jokes and stuff are just the best. He seems like such a nice dude.
But we really didn't. As you know, Tony, as a trial lawyer, you just don't have time for a lot of things other than what you have to do. So we just kind of.
If I could have one critique, yes, you don't have time, but when you have 10 lawyers working on something, one of them can probably keep track of the social media or the YouTube videos and stuff that's being posted. If I had to have one little critique.
Moved ahead.
So now that you know, now we've had this example, right? So in the future, for your next high profile case, do you think it will that color any way that your strategy is created, do you think?
They're probably going to say no, but it should. I mean, if the information's out there, why would you not gather it? To act like they didn't use any kind of research on any of the jurors and stuff during jury selection, I don't know. I think it should come into play, in my opinion.
Ben, do you want to take this one?
Sure. I think if we knew in advance we'd have another televised trial, I think we would do. I mean, obviously, we would always do things differently because we could always have done certain things better. But I think the approach to try to do it thematically and to try to tell a story is something that we would probably do again. I would just hope that we had the same team.
Right. Speaking of that, how do you pick your team? What criteria did you use to pick your team?
Well, I'll start out because Camille chose a lot of the other members of the team. But when this case started out, it was just a core of Camille, myself, and another attorney. My rule on this case was that anybody who worked on this case had to be materially smarter than me, which is a fairly low bar, and they all cleared that bar. But beyond that, we really chose people with whom we not only respected as lawyers, but whom we respected as people. In other words, people we could get along with, people who had high character, who had a sense of humor, because we knew this was going to be extremely difficult. And although we each brought our own different perspectives to it, and we tried to have some doubters among us, and we did. We had two we called Eeyore because they constantly told us we had no chance to win until about the middle of the trial.
Do you guys use Eeyore in your everyday life? Because I do all the time in describing people as Eeyore that are kind of like melancholy. We have a pessimistic trial lawyer in our firm. I won't say which one of us it is, but that always tells us the negatives of the case, which is good because a couple of us are pretty aggressive and table pounding. So it's really good to have that balance. And it's so smart that that's how they built their team. It's so smart. I love how he said everybody's got to be materially smarter than him. I find that most older partners, I don't know how old he is, but most senior partners, that's a good mindset to have, is get smarter people, get good people around you, get people you trust, things like that. Yeah, Debbie Downers, Eliza said, yes, stuff kind of like that. But Eeyore is one that I use all the time. I think it's funny they used it.
We did think it was important that the people who worked on this case believed Johnny, because we fervently believed him, or we would not have recommended that he file this case. As you know, Tony, defamation cases are inherently difficult. Truth is a defense. So, I mean, obviously all of us do due diligence before we file any complaint for Rule 11 and other reasons, but defamation cases, as you know, you have to be particularly careful. So by the time, Camille and I and a couple of the others who were on at the beginning, we were true believers in the sense that we'd really looked at all the evidence and we'd done a lot of hard digging. And it was important for us to have others who were of like mind and who were willing to, we knew even before we knew it's televised, that there might be some criticism. We were kind of running against the tide of Me Too, which, by the way, all of us, including Johnny, support. And we also understand that the vast majority of victims are telling the truth. But as Camille likes to point out, and she'll say it more articulately than I do, there's also a notion of due process that we all have to remember, especially when, you know, we're dealing with controversial subjects, that you have to just kind of wait. There's plenty of time to judge after the fact. So it was important for all of us, you know, to be kind of like mind in terms of how we interacted with each other, and that we, you know, we had a belief in the client.
Makes sense. Camille, did you want to add anything to that? How do you pick your strategy?
I mean, I think that I echo Ben's thoughts on this.
So just so you know, I heard this happened. Her mic has issues. It's a little bit lower now. There's nothing I could do. They tried to fix it during it. I think it ends up coming back eventually before people get upset about not being able to hear it.
I mean, for me, it was important to have a young team. I thought that we were dealing with issues that resonated with young people. And I thought that in some way, as maybe as counterintuitive as this may sound, is I think sometimes less experience motivates people to really throw themselves into a case and over prepare and dig into the facts. And that's what happened in this case, right? And we gave opportunities to young lawyers that had never necessarily taken a witness before. And
I can barely, I mean, your sound went out a little bit. Sorry.
okay, can you hear me okay now?
It's not, I can still hear you. Just, that's all right. Keep going.
Okay. So we gave opportunities as much as we could to young lawyers because we thought that A, they had earned it, and B, you know, if they had one or two witnesses, they were going to work really hard for those one or two witnesses and knock it out of the park. And they would know everything, every pitfall for that witness. They would know exactly what type of evidence to elicit that, you know, worked with the theme, and how to prepare that witness for cross-examination. So I think they did a phenomenal job, and that was important to me, is to have a young team looking at this from different perspectives. And yet Ben is correct. We all believed Johnny. That was the one requirement, right? And it goes without saying that that was incredibly important in this case. And we did. We all believed him. We believed that he did not do this, and he was, in fact, the victim of domestic violence. And we just needed to convince this jury that that was the case.
Thank you. So Ben, you mentioned, you know, a little bit about if you got the same type of case, you do things different.
So once again, I'm trying my best to deal with the sound. It is Camille's sound that is messing up. They try to fix it. I will try to turn it down when other people are talking. I will try not to blow your eardrums out. I'm doing my best here, but this is the video that they posted, so that's what we're working with.
Differently. What do you think you would do differently?
Well, I think I think we probably would have gotten more of these great young lawyers involved earlier. I agree with Camille. I think they did a phenomenal job. I think it was more interesting for the jury to see different lawyers do different things. I think the judge appreciated it because it was, judges, as you know, tend to like younger lawyers. They don't want to just see the two partners, you know, getting up and snapping their fingers and asking for documents. I mean, that's not the way this team was. And I think it came across well. So one of the things I think I'd do differently is to get those lawyers involved in depositions earlier, not just say scripting it out for Camille or Jessica or me, but to get involved earlier on. So that's one thing I would do the next time.
That's interesting. So he said he would have used the young lawyers even more and earlier in the process, having them do the depositions and stuff. I will say, the young lawyers did a great job. One of the issues with having them do all that stuff is sometimes the client doesn't want it. So if Johnny wanted Ben Chu or Camille specifically to do depots, sometimes that's the reason you do it. But it worked out in this case, and it was a good strategy having the young lawyers work with it as well. But there are a lot of things going on. It's not just like it's mean for an older lawyer or a senior partner not to use a young associate. It's not, based on certain things. Sometimes it's based on client choice. Sometimes it's based on who's best equipped to handle that. So there are a lot of factors that do go into it. But it's interesting that that's what he said.
Good. Is there, Ben, then Camille, is there something in the trial process, in the trial prep process up until trial, is there anything that you, about that you hate? Like there's just one thing you just do not like when you have to prepare?
Maybe Camille could go first while I think about that. That's a great question.
Can you hear me first
Yes.
of all? Yes.
I can hear you.
Good. Okay, great. There's something that I don't like about the process, the trial process.
Yeah, like just of all the things that we have to do, is there one thing you're like, okay, somebody else do that? That's the one thing I really don't like to do.
Oh yeah, discovery. It's the worst.
Really?
Discovery and discovery disputes. It's the worst. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I think the other lawyers are going to kind of disagree with her. I'm with her 100%. So like regular everyday discovery, asking those questions, getting those answers, even some simple discovery depots. I don't do like any of those anymore in our firm. They bore me. They feel grueling. They feel tedious. So it is funny that she said that. I agree with her. I'm with her 100%. If you don't know what discovery is specifically, it's typing out those interrogatory questions or answering them with your client. If they object, which they do to all of them, you have to file a motion and you have to research case law as to what you can get, what you can't. Sometimes both sides know what you're going to get and you still have to fight about it. And it's miserable and it can take forever and it can be document review. So I'm with her. The action is much more fun. But I think these other two lawyers, or at least I know Tony is going to disagree with her, the president of the Beverly Hills Bar Association. He says he loves discovery, which that's great. That's why you have to have a team, a balanced team where everybody likes doing different things and everybody's good at different things. That's what makes a team great. If you have a bunch of A types that all like the same thing, it's not going to work out. So it's, I think it's good to have a team like that.
You'll find a lawyer that says, oh, I love meeting conferring with the other side, or I love writing discovery motions.
Now, I give you that. I don't love discovery motions. I really do love discovery. I'm weird that way. I like discovery a lot.
I would say deposition designations, and I exercise prerogative as the old guy on the team that I had. I asked Camille to supervise the young attorneys to argue the deposition designations, and in this case, and I don't know.
So I see some people in the chat talking about type A, type B personalities. So it's funny. Sometimes when I first meet people, they think I'm one thing, and I don't know if I've ever actually like said what I am on here, like Enneagram stuff or whatever. But tell me in the chat if you think that I am a type A, or if you think I'm a type A or a type B personality. Let me know.
I don't really know how it works so well in California, but in Virginia, usually the judges don't give a lot of their own time to that and expect the lawyers to work it out among themselves, and they give it short shrift. In this case, the chief judge gave us a lot of time, so she would reserve each Friday, because virtually all of Ms. Heard's witnesses, other than her experts and her sister, were done by deposition. So it was a big part of her case, less so of our case. So it was very important. These were crucial battles that were played out every Friday, because Friday was an off day of trial. And that's something that I found tedious and really required a lot of attention. And Camille and the young lawyers really fought it out tooth and nail. And it was really important. And I think that was, if not dispositive, I think that was really important because, and this is kind of a dominant theme, they really had two lawyers doing almost everything. They had a team of competent lawyers. They had lawyers who could have done more, but for whatever reason, and maybe it was a client imperative, we don't know, it was pretty much just the two of them. And they both were very good, but they were getting worn around the edges. And it showed. I mean, not in closing. Of course, you're
I'm on mute. People just said I'm on mute. So I just said that whole thing while I was on mute, which is great because my son keeps coming downstairs. He's supposed to be in bed. So I muted it to tell him to go back upstairs. Sorry. I see everybody saying I'm on mute. Okay. Sorry about that. I wanted to say, Melissa Hardin, for the crazy, huge super chat. Thank you. Let's talk about grammar a little bit. And I said, when he said Camille and I, your mic, Elaine, everybody's saying, great. I'm so glad you guys did this. Your mic, Elaine, your mic. When he said Camille and me, I was like, oh, I heard a little twinge and I was like, oh wait, no, that actually is right. And Melissa Hardin also picked up on it. She said it was so nice to hear Ben Chu use proper grammar in the beginning, thanking the interviewer for having Camille and me instead of the incorrect Camille and I. My mother always said to drop the other name and then you'd realize you weren't thanking someone for having I. And she is absolutely right. Thank you for having me, not thank you for having I. So this is a great point by Melissa Hardin. I appreciate it. And just in case anybody wants to come on and listen to the interview for the next couple minutes, I'm going to leave this comment up here so they can all get a little grammar lesson thanks to Melissa Hardin.
You're going to have your energy for the closing and the opening and the big witnesses like, Amber and Johnny. But at things like deposition excerpts, the partners were kind of made fun of me when I was just bringing sandwiches to the team when they would do those arguments. But I think they envied me by the end of the process because for me, it was kind of a day off. And that's something I found tedious, but I think they did much better than I would have done. So I think it's really important to utilize the team you've got.
I think an important point he made there too is if you're going to do something halfway as a senior partner, then you should definitely have the younger associate go full hog. We already talked about this, but I'm with him 100%. Where if it's something you don't want to do and somebody else is just foaming at the mouth and is going to put all their energy into it, definitely the better way to go.
And they want to do it, and they will rise to the occasion. If you've chosen wisely, they will rise to the occasion.
It looks like all of yours did, really. You guys had an impressive team. Camille, what's the funniest thing that ever happened in a courtroom?
In the courtroom?
Not necessarily just this trial, but in a courtroom, what's the funny thing that happened?
Oh, well, I think this trial had a lot of examples of that. I mean, everything from Johnny using his sense of humor and showing everyone his legal knowledge. He would object to questions before we would, or he would say, oh gosh, what I'm about to say is that must be hearsay. I mean, there were some really funny moments. There were some interesting witnesses, not to name any names, but there was one in particular, the other side, an expert that was bizarre and comical, but yeah, I mean, there were some really funny moments, and of course some inside jokes that we all shared. I mean, right. I'll let Ben share this one, but Ben, we got a mascot, right? That was our team mascot, and let's just put it this way: our team mascot infiltrated the other side's closing arguments. I'll let Ben explain that though.
Ben, please, I got to know what that's about.
Well, the alpaca. Shortly after the op-ed, Ms. Hurd's op-ed was published, Disney let it be known that they were dismissing him from Pirates of the Caribbean. A reporter called Johnny or accosted him and said, would you ever come back to Disney if they apologized to you? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, not for $200 million and 100 million alpacas. So one of his fans each day brought to trial, didn't get into the courtroom, but outside the courtroom brought 2 comfort alpacas. Now, I never knew that there was such a thing as a comfort alpaca, but apparently there are.
I'm just learning that now. So
it was, it became the mascot of the trial. And someone gave me a miniature alpaca, which I had in my pocket during an argument. And the judge's senior law clerk said to me during the break, you had an alpaca in your pocket. Said to her, I hope you didn't rat me out to your boss? And she said, I didn't, but you really should be careful next time. So what Camille was alluding to is we had, for closing argument, the way the courtroom was situated, there was an enormous lectern that was about a mile away from the jury. And I had used that for opening because I didn't have Camille's courage. Camille went right in front of the jury, which is the way you're supposed to do it. But I knew that that was not workable for closing, which we were going to split. And because we were so busy, we couldn't memorize the closing. We had the dilemma. Do we want to be before the jury just with the...
So this was an interesting point. And I want to point out a lot of people threw some nasty shade when I said the only critique, if I had one, is Camille basically read her closing off of a piece of paper. And I still thought it was great. And I thought it was great because she had the exhibits to pull at the perfect time. But I think ideally, usually as a trial lawyer who presents things and convinces juries of things for a living, you want to have it not fully memorized, but some kind of outline where you're really talking to the jury. You're not married to a piece of paper. And this is just proof. Ben Chu is saying they wish they could have memorized it. They weren't able to. They don't want to be married to that huge lectern where it feels like there's a wall between them and the jury. So they figured out a way to kind of make it work together where they didn't feel so far away from the jury. He's really giving you a lot of insight into how trial lawyers think about their opening statements and closing arguments and speeches to the jury. It is very important. And there's a lot of things that we think about, and we don't want there to be anything between us and the jury or something that's going to get in the way of what we're trying to relay to the jury.
A big stack of notes, which is kind of awkward, or do we want to, seek protection behind the big podium, which would look like we were afraid and not believing in ourselves. So I found a tiny little podium that had belonged to my mother. It was an encyclopedia holder. So I found that, I brought it in, and I put the little alpaca in the little drawer for good luck. So Camille and I both used the podium to our great advantage. And then, unfortunately, one of Miss Heard's lead counsel, Ben Rottenborn, he took advantage of it. Before I could take the podium away and force him to make that Hobson's choice, he seized the podium. And to my horror, he used it to great effect. And to throw him off during a break, I said, there's an alpaca in there. And he gave me stink eye. So we had a little humor there. But as Camille said, there were Johnny had some great lines.
And Mo asked, Peter, do you think Ben's facial expressions and gestures would have been the same had there not been cameras in the courtroom? My guess is he's probably pretty similar. I do think some of his arguments outside the presence of the jury is where the biggest difference came. As to if there weren't cameras in the courtroom, I think they would have been a little different because he knew he was going to lose, but he really put on a show a couple times, which was very interesting. And then Ellen Leah said, I have no idea how you do your job and still go live. Impressive. Thank you, Peter. Still need to know what North Carolina golf shirt you don't have that you want. Funny you mentioned that. I'm wearing my Tobacco Road golf shirt today, and I have all of the Pinehurst ones. Besides that, I don't have any. So anything else would be awesome, but don't feel like you have to.
In his direct that we hadn't anticipated, that were just quite, when the other side would say, well, did I read that correctly? He would really undercut it by saying, you read that quite well, Mr. Rottenborn. So he was able to disarm opposing counsel without being snarky or without being disrespectful, which, as you know, is not what you want your witnesses to be.
Yeah, he's, it's funny. I thought of the two of them. They're both actors, right? I was watching, she would look at the jury in a way, I don't know if that was something that someone had told her that she should do, because sometimes that actually works if you look at the jury. But the way she did it did not seem to resonate to me, and I wondered if it resonated with the jury. But that's all these different little strategies. You mentioned Camille, and did I read that right? Camille said that a lot. Every time she said it, it sounded sincere. And I don't know if the other side was trying to use that to, use her strategy for themselves. But it's funny, and again, same thing. You said you wanted to use the podium further away. She wanted to use the podium closer. All those little strategy points are, I think, what makes a really good trial lawyer, because you have to know you can't do the exact same thing that someone else does. It doesn't work. You have to find your own, what makes you, you, and then give that to the jury.
That's 100% correct. Like, I've seen people try to mimic other trial lawyers, and it always fails. Like, I'm never going to have that Southern drawl and the perfect comb over of some of these Southern lawyers here in Florida that just do an amazing job presenting a case to a jury. The way they even say that, I mean, it's just you got to be your own person. You know, I've got a very distinct personality, and if I try to be a all ho hum, and that's not going to work either. And every trial lawyer is very different. They're not all big, huge, boisterous, big personalities. They all have different ways about them, and you can be successful in whatever your personality is. But a jury can definitely see through when you're trying to act as a lawyer. So I think that's a great tip there.
Do you see that yourself, Ben?
Yeah. Oh, I think, Tony, that is spot on. I think that is such a great practice point, because you can't emulate somebody else. You can pick up certain things. Oh, Tony did this really well. I can try to fold that in, but I couldn't possibly be you. And we all have our own strengths and weaknesses. And I completely agree. And that goes for the younger attorneys as well. They're going to do things a little differently than you do. And that's probably a good thing, that the jury is seeing different things. And we tried to do that in terms of subjects. For example, for closing, Camille had done what I think was just an outstanding cross-examination of Ms. Heard. And I think, of course, I'm biased, but I think she came across as not mean and not trying to vilify her, but just using her own words and getting her to explain that. So we thought, for example, in closing, Camille had handled Amber, and she should address, those points. And for me, my job in closing was to try to explain to the jury what Johnny had lost. And he's a lot younger looking than I am and a lot better looking, but we're about the same age. And I can't pretend that I understand his life, but I've had some experiences common to him, and I can imagine, at least in part, what it would be like at his age to lose a career and to have his children have to, they never believed it. It's not like they believed their dad was a bad guy or done any of these things, but to have their children have to go through life with this stigma. So it was my job to try to convey that in closing to the jury. So I was less kind of focused on some of these gotcha points, and it's more than gotcha. I mean, the merits, as it were, but to try to put it in terms, not in dollars and cents, but what this man had lost and what was at stake for him, which was to get his life back.
Right.
So we gave that a lot of thought, and I think Camille could have handled that, beautifully, but we were trying to figure out which one of us would handle certain things better.
Thank you. So Camille, in terms of how you connect with a witness, have you ever had a witness or someone you really couldn't connect with, Camille, that you really kind of had to try to find your footing? Maybe they were much older than you or a different background?
Of course, I think that's part of being a trial lawyer, right? You have to adjust, right? You have to course correct. I think that something that gave us an advantage in this case was, you guys can't hear me. I'm getting lost down.
I can hear you, but I can't hear you as well as I can.
Okay. I might switch to audio on my phone if that's easier, but
okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just answer this question and then I'll switch to audio on my phone. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No problem. Just like course correct, we'll work with it.
Yeah, we're course correcting. So what I was saying is, I think something that gave us an advantage was we had a really interesting deep bench of attorneys that we could pull from. And my job really was to try to put certain witnesses with certain attorneys. And it was about chemistry. And it was about, making sure that they had something that made sense. And that's why I put certain attorneys with certain witnesses. But for me, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did the cross-examination of Amber Heard's orthopedic surgeon that opined on the cause of Johnny's finger injury. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not, a distinguished doctor, and that's not my background. And we just talked about how science and math aren't necessarily my forte, but I focused in on, as a juror, right, not having necessarily a medical background. How can I explain my point to the jury? And I think that's the best way to do it. Yes, sometimes you're going to have a witness you can't find the right rhythm. You can't find anything in common with them. And it's about just focusing on, to me, what the jury is hearing and listening to and communicating that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add, Tony, that that's why you say you love discovery, and I do too. And that's one of the ways where you can kind of make that assessment. I mean, for example, we had 3 days of deposition of Ms. Heard, and she had 3 of Johnny, because Virginia doesn't have the 7-hour rule. So we negotiated a 3 days. So we also tag teamed it, where Camille took 1 day, I took 2 days. And clearly Camille was much more effective eliciting information from Amber than I was. So to me, it wasn't a very difficult decision, which we collectively decided that Camille would be doing Ms. Heard at trial, because I mean, it was objectively clear that she was more effective with that particular witness. And if you have discovery, of course, you've got the luxury of doing a postmortem and looking in to see who elicited what. It's harder, obviously, on rebuttal witnesses where you haven't had the opportunity. And one example, to those of you who saw the trial, was the TMZ witness, the witness who came on, who testified to the effect that the paparazzi had been tipped off in advance of Ms. Heard's ex parte TRO hearing, which was a powerful testimony for Mr. Depp. And Ms. Heard's counsel hadn't had the luxury of taking his deposition. He was a rebuttal witness. So that's kind of an example, Tony, I think, of what you're talking about. And she's a very skilled attorney, but she had a world of trouble with that witness. And, he really got the best of her. There was one question where she accused him of, well, aren't you just appearing at this trial to have your 15 minutes of fame? And he turned it around and said, well, I could be saying the very same thing of you. So,
yeah, that's right. That's what he's saying. Lawyers love to be prepared. And when we get something we're not prepared for, that's what separates I was going to say the men from the boys, but the cream from the crop. And he said Elaine's a really good lawyer, but she really struggled there.
It goes to your point. You don't always hit it off with certain witnesses.
Right. And I mean, he was masterful. That's what I was saying about intuition as an actor, I think. I mean, Camille had mentioned this, those exchanges about when he figured out what hearsay was. Those were really, I mean, those were genuinely funny moments. And it didn't come off snarky. It made him, it endeared him, I think, to I assume the jury, because it definitely endeared him to me, and I'm just watching from a distance. So, are you superstitious at all when it comes to trials, Ben?
Yes. And I was very superstitious when I had a friend of mine who's a very senior lawyer in Washington, and he said, "You're winning." And I said, no, don't say that. Don't you dare say that. We're playing from behind. We have no chance of winning this. No, I don't want to hear anything like that. And when anybody started to sound optimistic, I would turn the other way.
Camille, is Camille, are you back with us? Can you hear us, Camille?
I think most lawyers are exactly how Ben
just said.
You don't want to jinx it.
But Ben, all right. So You're superstitious about that. Is there a type of law that you were also interested in and you didn't get to do? You went in this direction, but was there anything else pulling at you that you almost thought you were going to do?
Well, out of law school, I had the notion in my head that I wanted to be an international trade lawyer. I had visions of, crossing the globe and, kind of a James Bond lifestyle. But I actually practiced international law in Washington for some very nice people for about a year. And I realized it really wasn't. It was very technical. It wasn't really at all what I expected. And by luck, because I speak some Spanish, I was brought in as a very young associate to a case between Standard Fruit Company, a California company at the time, and the Sandinista government of Nicaragua. So that was really an exciting case. We got to go down to Nicaragua and take depositions of comandantes. And I thought, gosh, litigation's the way to go. I mean, you're traveling. It's exciting. There's a mild patina of danger without any real danger.
Right.
And it's a lot of fun. So I thought that was when I really got the litigation bug. I mean, I'd done moot court in law school, but I really wasn't committed to litigation until that. And I have really loved it.
For those of you who don't know, moot court is, most people have heard of mock trial where you do fake trials in law school in front of real judges. Moot court is like fake appeals. So you get a problem, you get a trial, basically you have to write an appellate brief, you have to research all the cases, put it all together, then you go do an oral argument. And while you're at the oral argument, I actually thought, I was on moot court and mock trial in law school, and I actually thought moot court was potentially more fun because you get up there and there's 3 judges firing questions at you from whatever issues they want to pick out. It is really fun, and he's saying that's what got him into litigation. There are a lot of practical things you can do in law school that are extracurriculars that can really give you a taste of what the real world is like, as opposed to just digging in and reading and doing nothing else but studying. Anybody in law school, I recommend extracurriculars, especially mock trial and moot court.
Ever since.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, we can.
Yay.
Hey.
Okay.
So Camille, I'll ask you what I'd ask Ben. I see where you are, the type of practice that you have now. Was there something else pulling at you, or is there something else pulling at you, another type of law that also captures your attention?
Yeah, I think a lot of things capture my attention, right? As a trial lawyer, both Ben and I really strive to be generalists. And, but obviously we're getting a lot of potential cases that are either defamation in nature or Me Too cases, if that's how you want to look at them. But I think that's something that's really true for both Ben and me is that, and our team, by the way, that is about due process, right? And it's almost, instead of anti-Me Too, it's what I would call maybe anti-cancel culture. And
Okay.
It's about, making sure that there is an investigation and that there is due process before someone is canceled. And we take that really seriously. And I think Johnny's case was an example of exactly that. So as journalists, we're interested in a lot of cases, and we just want to do good trial work.
Nice. Camille, I'm going to pivot a little bit. I want to ask you about being Latina and being a woman in this profession. As you can imagine, that you don't have to imagine that you live some of the same circles I do. A lot of people don't look like me when I'm going to court. And the same can be said to you. How do you think the profession is holding up in terms of its ability to, add diversity, at least invite diversity, and really kind of broaden the practice to a lot more different types of people?
Well, I think it has to, right? And I think it's happening. It's a great time to be a woman. It's a great time to be a minority. Juries are diverse, and companies and individuals are realizing that they want different people that look more like their juries on their trial team. And so I think it's a great time in the profession. Obviously, it hasn't historically always been as easy. But I do think that some advice that I give to especially women, right, young women, is you just have to prepare more. You have to be the most prepared person in the room because you will be challenged, and you have to be able to have the confidence to respond. To do that, the way that I have found is through hard work and being the most prepared person in that room.
I think that's good advice. If you had children, I don't think you do. Do you have children?
And that goes along with, like, it used to be you had to look a certain way, and especially older lawyers or judges expected you to look a certain way. I do think that is changing, and I think that's a good change. I don't think that just looking exactly like every other lawyer that walks in there or what people expect lawyers to look like. I've talked about this in other streams. I do think that's changing. And I really think I don't think jurors and normal people, I mean, I'm sure they did care about some stuff, but it felt more to me like older lawyers, different generations of lawyers or judges that expected a certain look or type of person to be a lawyer. So I do think that's kind of changing all the way around in a lot of businesses, not just law, but law seems to be pretty old school.
Children?
I do not.
If you had children, would you encourage them to become lawyers?
It depends on the child. I think, look, it's an incredibly rewarding profession. And I, from a young age, I think I was meant to be a lawyer. I was meant to be an advocate. I have a funny story. I was young in elementary school, and I felt that the lunch ladies weren't being very nice to the kids. And I made it a point to call for a meeting with Miss Alice, who was the head of the lunch ladies, and try to mediate some type of deal, right, where we would behave better, but they would behave better towards us and not yell at us. And I thought lunch be a time of it shouldn't be stressful. And I was so stressed out going to that cafeteria because these lunch ladies were just yelling at these kids, and I just thought it was wrong. And so I had to stand up, and I called for a meeting, and they were actually really receptive. I mean, they probably thought I was ridiculous, like little 7-year-old, but it was important to me that everyone treat each other with respect and not, be pejorative just because we were young kids. So I think I've always been a natural born advocate, and ever since I could speak, it was something that I was meant to do.
Wow, 7-year-old. Okay, interesting. So Ben, let's ask you the same question or something similar. When you were young, maybe 7, when do you remember your first examples of you advocating?
I don't have anything as compelling as Camille's story, but I did do that, and now I'm worried about my own kids. I'm an older father. My kids are 10 and 11, and I was hoping that they would do something different. But my youngest was at overnight camp a few weeks ago, and he complained that he wasn't allowed to have seconds without eating his vegetables. So he started, like Camille, he started a movement at his camp called Kids Against Cantaloupe, which was unsuccessful. Fruit and vegetables continued to be served, and it continued to be a condition before he got seconds. But now I'm worried that he's going to be a lawyer as well.
That's fun.
Having a dad that's a lawyer brings that out of you. I can say that from experience. Negotiating bedtimes, negotiating everything our whole life. I always say I feel like I had to negotiate everything my entire life with him.
Funny. And that's why I actually asked that question of Camille, because it's almost like to a person, lawyers don't want their children to be lawyers. Tell me why that is, if you have an opinion on that, Ben.
I think it's very hard profession. I mean, I really enjoy it myself, and I'm older, so it was a little easier when I was coming up, because in those days, if you were a good lawyer, meaning if you worked hard and you did everything right, you could have a pretty, well, again, that's coming from my background. My background's easier, not having been a minority. So I get that. But, and it was harder, obviously, for people of color and for women, when I was coming up, and still is. But I think it's harder now. in the sense of, if you're talking about private practice, because now I think young lawyers, fairly or unfairly, are looked at to have a lot of business. And I don't know, as a 30-something lawyer, how many 30-somethings are in a position to have a lot of business, because,
He's 100% right. I mean, now business is king, your own book of business. You've got to pay for yourself. You've got to be able to generate clients. You've got to be able to generate dollars. That matters pretty much more than anything. It's difficult to go into a place and just grind away and show you're really good and cut your teeth working for somebody else. They're not just going to hand you money. They're not just going to hand you clients. You've got to prove you can get clients on your own. You've got to prove you can get the confidence of clients. That is some of the most difficult things to do as a lawyer. We always think about convincing a judge. Well, most of the time, you're not convincing a judge and you're not convincing other lawyers. The most important people to convince are normal, everyday people that are either on juries or make the decision whether or not to hire you as a client. That's what I tell. I mean, I am still a young lawyer, but that's what I try to tell people, like my friends, my peers, whatever, that are stuck in situations they don't like. I said, you know what? You go get clients, you go get business. They'll be forced to respect you. They'll be forced to promote you. They'll be forced to pay you more, or you can go somewhere else with your clients and with your book of business. So I think this is a great little piece of advice, but I agree with him. It is hard, because when you're competing against more experienced people, you're competing against, people that look or act a certain way or went to a certain school or things like that. It can be more difficult. It is a very difficult arena to break into because it's so competitive. It's so oversaturated. So, I think this is good advice. It is harder, but it can be done. It can absolutely be done. You got to be able to think differently. You got to try different things. You got to market yourself differently. You got to meet different people. You've got to meet people and give them the confidence in you and let them get to know you as a lawyer. And if they're confident in you and you do a good job, the business will come. Absolutely. It can be done. I tell young people that all the time, and people my age, it can be done. People that think about going back to law school, I know it seems really hard. It is hard. It's really competitive, but it can be done.
Their peers are not, general counsels. Their peers are not yet higher in the corporate hierarchy. And I just think the pressures are I think it's not just enough to be a good lawyer. I think you have to be a good lawyer plus. So I think it's a harder life. I don't mean to be a downer, because I think it's still a great profession, and there are many opportunities, not just to go to a law firm. Many other ways to be a lawyer. I have friends of mine who are great judges, but I think it's hard. I think that's why maybe, Tony, some of us aren't encouraging our kids to go into that, because I think it's not so easy.
I would agree with that. I always tell people that if you're called to it, do it. If you're on the fence, it's hard to do if you don't love it. Did you learn anything from opposing counsel? And I don't mean anything like
JKGN, as most of you know, I disagree with this, because 99% of my clients don't pay me $1 out of their pocket. That's the best thing about a contingency fee and about doing personal injury like I do it and fighting for justice for injured victims. They don't have to pay me out of pocket. There are laws written in specific ways in most states that allow me to represent people. They don't pay me anything out of pocket. I get a percentage of the settlement, paid mostly by insurance companies. So rich or poor, I have cases of people all across every socioeconomic background, racial background, religious background, whatever, you name it. And that's what's great about it. In our criminal cases for my dad, you got to pay out of pocket. It's a different world, which is one of the things that drew me to personal injury and fighting for, poor people and letting them get the best representation in the world. I do. I love it. I love it being contingency fee. I love what we want and what we get paid being aligned with how much money the client gets, all of that. I love it.
Techniques, tactics, something you've not quite seen someone do before, or at least to good effect? If not this case, can you think of a case where opposing counsel, you really kind of...
It's like, obviously you didn't learn anything from opposing counsel on this
learn
case.
something.
Yeah, I can tackle that, and then Camille will probably have a better answer. I've learned from... I remember early in my career, I had a case against an attorney who was not from the greatest schools, and he didn't seem to be as bright as some other attorneys, but he was very effective, and he won the case. He told corny jokes, but they were authentic. Kind of, Tony, it goes back to your point about being yourself. He was himself. He was very likable, and he may not have been quite as book smart as somebody else, but he was very likable, and he was very smart as to what was really important about the case. And by contrast, not naming names, I've seen attorneys who are very sharp, but who don't hesitate to show that. And they need to show that they're the smartest person in the room, but that's not always the most effective attorney, as you know. My father told me something I'm not sure I learned, but he would look at me sometimes and say, Ben, you need to learn the value of the unexpressed thought. And that's, if you have it's good in your personal life too, that you might have a comment that might be witty or something, you want to say to your wife, but it's just not a good idea. And I think that's true in the courtroom as well, that it's not necessarily who the smartest is or who the smartest thinks he is. It's, you want to be human. And I've learned that from people in court, that sometimes you just need to let the jury or the judge make that final leap, and again, I think Camille did that a really nice job, in the course of Ms. Heard's cross-examination. I don't think she tried to go for any knockout punch. She kind of made her point and moved on. And I think that's really important in cross-examination. You don't want to make yourself unlikable.
That's true. Camille, same question. So have you, either in this trial or another one that you can think of, did you get to learn something from opposing counsel, something that you realized you might incorporate or at least be wary of?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that trial is so unpredictable, and we all know that as trial lawyers, right? And you have to be able to course correct. You have to be able to pivot. Not everything is going to go your way. And if there's something that I learned,
in fact, 1,000 things are going to be flipped upside down during the trial.
Is you have to plan also for things not to go your way, so that you have a solution in place. You should think worst case scenario. I'm going to get every objection. I'm going to deal with a witness that's going to be sympathetic. How do I handle that when that situation arises? And I think something that we did quite well as a team is we were able to pivot. And I'm not certain that the other side was so effective at that. And it really surprised me, if I'm being honest, that such experienced attorneys didn't seem to be able to course correct and pivot. But it's a lesson, I think, for all of us, because yes, the case went our way and the verdict speaks for itself and it was definitive. But we had bad days too, and it's about how you course correct.
What would you say would have been was a bad day?
I think there were days where there was, evidence coming in where Amber was putting on her case in chief, and we knew that the evidence was going to be contradictory to, Mr. Depp's version of what occurred. And so it was tough to be able to help the client understand that this was just part of the process, right? It was tough to hear this evidence that we thought was false. And it's discouraging, right? And it was hard to get. We had one of our experts that wasn't allowed to testify. That was really disappointing for us.
Interesting. They had an expert that wasn't able to testify. We know about this, and we know about a lot of the evidence that didn't come in, yet they didn't complain about it the whole time, which I just think is interesting to point out. A lot of you are asking some really cool questions, so we are going to do a little bit of that at the end for fun. A lot of them are kind of off topic or personal, which is fun. So we're going to answer those at the end as well.
And, but it's about how you deal with it and how you keep it moving forward and keep the client engaged, keep the client on the same page as you and understanding that this is just all part of the process.
That's, I think, a good point. I think one of the things that and it happens more in your, if you're a plaintiff's attorney, I think, at least it feels like it does. clients don't know this process, and I find they get very frustrated when they're confronted with it, because again, that's why I say TV and movies do us a disservice. Ben, how do you convey what is about to happen, or when you have a client, this was a very long trial. Johnny's, he's worldly and experienced, and he probably got it better than many others. But how do you prepare a client for this journey?
It was hard, and this case went on longer than most in Virginia because of COVID. We had the trial was delayed twice because of COVID, and once because our first chief judge retired. And that really caused a lot of frustration for Johnny. And I thought the whole discovery process was one long frustration, because we had to keep telling him, other than his deposition, and even at his deposition, just obviously answer the question you're asked. This isn't your time. You'll have a chance to tell your story. And I think it was enormously frustrating for him. His life had basically stopped.
Client control and client explanation is one of the most difficult parts about being a lawyer, especially a plaintiff's lawyer, like they said, because these are people's lives. They're fully invested. They feel very strongly about it. And yet they've got to play by certain rules that are frustrating. There are delays. The other side delays on purpose. The judges allow it sometimes. It can be very frustrating for clients. So that kind of client explanation is really, really, really important.
Professionally. Studios weren't returning agents' calls. He was living through hellish publicity, and his lawyers were saying, you can't do anything about it. So I think in that sense, the trial was paradoxically a bit of a release for him, because he knew that he was finally going to have an opportunity to speak. And I think he finally realized that we knew something about what we were talking about, because some things that we told him, and I've had this with other clients too, that during the discovery process, they kind of think you're just someone to whom they're paying bills. And as you say, they see it on TV, I could do that. I could ask those questions Tony's asking. But I think when they get to trial, it becomes a little more real for them. And when they see their attorneys functioning in a competent way, or relatively competent way, and what we told him is unfolding, I think it creates confidence in the client. And they begin to think, now I'm understanding what I was paying for. Now I know why they wanted to prepare me for so long. Now, they see the sausage being made, and then they see how it comes out. And even though, as Camille said, and as you know, it doesn't always come out the way you want, it often does. It does enough that the client is happier than he was during discovery, I think.
Right. Camille, I'm asking you this question because I've
no clients are happy during discovery where they're digging into every crevice of your life.
Been practicing, 12, 13, 14 years, I don't know. And I know that it's starting to be, I can feel the difference from being a young lawyer to being a little bit more seasoned. And Camille, how do you handle, sometimes clients or witnesses, they size you up because of your age. And how do you deal with that? Even judges do it, opposing counsel does it. How do you handle that? Or do you feel like that's something you have to handle?
I love to be underestimated.
Me too.
I love it. Again, this goes back to over preparation, hard work, and just doing your job, right? I mean, look, we got a tremendous amount of recognition, but we just did our job, and we did it well. And, I think that you earn the respect of your clients by continuing to do your job, continuing to win, continuing to do a good job for him or her. And you sometimes get the opportunity to showcase that to the client or to the world in our case. But trust me when I just say it's nice to be underestimated, and it just drives me.
I understand that. I totally understand that. Ben, I'm going to ask you this question. I actually think I know Camille's answer. I think I heard it, although I'm going to ask her a second. Ben, when they do the movie, who do you want to play you?
I think Judge Reinhold.
Okay.
He's a goofy looking guy like me. No disrespect to him, but I think that would be the right guy.
I can see that. Camille, I want to hear what you said. Just curious, because I think I heard you answer the question. I'm curious if your answer is different.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny about this question is throughout the process, again, I'm telling Ben's secrets, but Ben has a wicked sense of humor. It's part of the reason that I know I love working with him. But throughout this long case, he would periodically send out emails to the team especially when we got new team members, being like, okay, casting for the Depp v. Heard case. So-and-so's going to play Camille, so-and-so's going to play the new member of the team. And I'm trying to remember, I think.
Before she answers, who would you guys say should play Camille in the movie? And Ben. I know some people said Tom Hanks with Ben. I like that one. What would you say for Camille?
Only because Penelope Cruz is actually a good friend of Johnny's. I think Ben had recommended Penelope Cruz. When I was growing up, some people said I looked a bit like Eva Longoria. I mean, gosh, I'd be tickled pink to be represented by any of these, beautiful, smart, captivating actresses. And gosh, I don't know.
It's like the worst question in the world. I would never want to answer that. I would hate it. I would hate to be asked that question. Hate it.
I think we're just about almost done. So Camille, what would you say? Let's talk to young lawyers. I know that at Beverly Hills Bar Association, one of the things that we always are trying to do is encourage young lawyers to become more involved, because that's the lifeblood. I feel like it's the lifeblood of what we do, is to have young people come in, and you showcase that in this trial. So speak to young lawyers, young people who maybe are thinking about becoming attorneys, or even just those in law school or just graduating law school. What advice would you tell them for the first, that they should focus on for, maybe the beginning of a career, or trying to start off a career like this?
Well, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of long hours, but it does pay off. I mean, there is no shortcuts, unfortunately, right? And it goes back to your question and the discussion we had about whether lawyers encourage their children to become lawyers. It's a hard profession, and it just requires a lot of hard work. But I promise that it gets easier. I promise certain things start to make sense. And I think watching trials, take as many opportunities as you can to, if you want to be a trial lawyer, right? Go to trials, sit in on trials, right? Watch how attorneys take depositions. You will learn so much. Sometimes you'll learn what not to do. And sometimes you'll pick up something that you can say, I can do that, or I can do it better, right? But learn by observing other lawyers and how they do it. I mean, I'm so grateful that this young team of lawyers was able to have this experience, because I can't tell you how many of them came up to me, especially my more junior team members, that said, I now understand why you said, we needed to object to this interrogatory request, or I now understand why we argued so hard for this discovery. And it all kind of comes together at trial. So my best piece of advice is work hard. It will get easier. Things will start to click and make sense. But there are really no shortcuts for this. This is a tough profession that requires blood, sweat, and tears, unfortunately.
Good advice. Ben, same thing to you. To young attorneys, or those who are thinking about coming into the profession, what advice would you have for them?
I would echo what Camille said, and also to use any opportunity to get into court and to get into depositions. For me, I used pro bono, because the firm I started out with, and Brown Rudnick has a strong commitment to pro bono. As a young lawyer, it's a great opportunity to get more responsibility early, because just a fact of life in a landlord-tenant case, Catholic Charities case, you're not going to have 6 lawyers on it unless it's a big case. It's going to be a young associate, maybe lightly supervised by a partner. And I think it's a great opportunity to get into court earlier. Is pro bono, I think, is a great way to do that. It's not that the case is less important, to the contrary, it's probably more important. But the reality is younger lawyers get more of an opportunity. And going back to Camille's point, that those younger lawyers are going to do a hell of a job because they're scared to death. And I remember my very first case was a child custody case before a Superior Court judge, Judge Sullivan, and he wrote us hard. And we both grew up. I mean, Judge Sullivan ended up being a federal judge, and he ended up doing a lot of the huge cases you're familiar with. And it's a great way to cut your teeth. And once you've done a trial, a pro bono trial, or big hearings, you're not scared. I mean, and I find, and I get off my soapbox, but there are a lot of people, even at big firms that who make a lot of money, who didn't take the opportunity. And so they find themselves as middle-aged and even older lawyers, and they're scared to death of the courtroom.
So this is true. And this is the thing this is something that always makes me think about, like, the young lawyer tag or the inexperienced tag. It's like a lot of these lawyers never actually cut their teeth in the courtroom, and they litigate cases. They litigate lots of cases. There are some cases when I was at the state attorney's office externing that everybody knew the case wasn't going to trial because a certain lawyer had it, and he always pled it the day of trial. So this is kind of the little sneaky secret as far as people saying they always want the older lawyer or more experienced lawyer. But what does that actually look like? Because looks can be deceiving, and it is very, very interesting. So I like that point by Ben.
Because they never did it when they were young, and it's too late to go back. If you're 45 years old and you've only been at one trial, it just doesn't work. So I would just say, seize the day, get involved in these cases, go to the partner and say, or go to a partner you admire and say, look, I really want to work with you. Of course, I'll do the document review, I'll do the scut work. But even some people who aren't that nice, if they see you working really hard, they're going to give you an opportunity. They're like, okay, I've seen you work that hard. You can take a deposition. So it'd be pro bono would be one thing. And then just really, as you all were saying, throw yourself into it and ask for the opportunity. Because it's not about money when you're young. There'll be money later on. Just get the experience.
And one of the things I learned quickly is that, which was great when I went to hearings for the first time, I realized, oh wow, everybody's behind me. You don't really see the people except for you're just talking to the judge. So it's not as daunting as you might think. I could do this all day. Thank you so much to Ben Chu and Camille Vasquez for joining us. This is the very first lunch with, and I really, really thank both of you. You really. All
right. That's the end of the interview. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. It was fun. I mean, it was a lot of information came out. We are going to get some questions because there are some really fun questions here that we have starred that I want to get through. Let's go to this one first by Tori. Peter, who would you like to have as second chair with you, Ben Chu or Camille? So I actually really, it would depend on the trial, and it would depend on kind of the strategy and what we wanted to go for. A lot of people do like having a male and a female, which I think there could be some things there that would be really fun to do with Camille, but I would lead toward Ben. Because I think that it's nice to have an older lawyer there that has some clout with the judge. If the jury wants to see experience next to somebody that looks like me, I think that's obviously good as well. They're always a beacon of knowledge, and I love having people with a lot more knowledge than I do and a lot more experience than I do around. I kind of always think of, like playing sports and stuff. And same thing with golf now, if I have like a scramble team, I like being the worst or one of the worst guys on the team because I know if I can push myself to a certain level, then we're going to be awesome. And that's kind of how I feel about it. That's why I would probably lean toward Ben Chu. Watching him, watching how he acts in the courtroom, watching how people look at him and kind of respond to him, watching him during objections. Certain lawyers can tell the judge how to respond, but Camille would be awesome to try a case with as well. Destroying witnesses the way she did, being prepared the way she would. So it'd be really hard I would love to, have either one of them with me, or I with them, or me with them, whatever the proper grammar is. I don't know where Miss Harden is. She could tell us, but that would be really fun. Good question. Okay. Kaylee Rose Mahan, I'm guessing your dad is the devil's advocate / retiree. I think this is when we were talking about Eeyore, and somebody else said, you mean doom and gloomer? Could it not become a self-fulfilling prophecy? So 2 things. No, it is not my dad. He's probably the most aggressive actually at our firm. It's either he or I. But the self-fulfilling prophecy is not really what the devil's advocate is in law, because when you talk about it, you have to see it from both sides. You do not want to get blindsided, and it's really important to have people that see the case a different way and can give you different ways to look at it. It's absolutely necessary to have the Eeyore or the pessimist around as well. All right, next topic. That's really fun. Ryan Gallo, dying to know your Enneagram number, and Zen Amen saying Tragos is a type A because I'm also a type A. Would love to know your Enneagram number. I'm an 8. So we did our first members only chat with the legal movies. Our second members only chat is going to be the legal TV shows. Our third members only chat, I've made the executive decision, is going to be about Enneagram. So the members are all going to get together, talk about what our Enneagram numbers are, how they kind of go with each other, the little triad where you're a wing, whatever. I'm a Enneagram not enthusiast, not expert, but just probably more than a novice. I know a little bit more than your average person maybe, or somebody that knows nothing about the Enneagram. Where'd you go to law school, Peter? Florida State University, College of Law, aka the Harvard of the South. Say C, what is the biggest challenge of being a lawyer? The competition and generating clients and getting cases for people that you really want to help. That is the most difficult part, no doubt about it. And this kind of goes right with Troy's question. Would you say there are too many lawyers? Not a joke, but is there enough work for the number of lawyers? Yes, there are too many lawyers. No, there's not enough work for all the lawyers. You have to separate yourself. You have to show yourself. You have to get out there. You have to, do a great job and work hard, just like Camille and Ben said. You have to prove to people that you can do the best job for them, and you're competent and capable and ready to work your tail off to be the best lawyer for them. Judy K, do you ever turn down a client because you don't think they will win, resulting in not paying you? So sure, but I think the real thing about when I turn down a case, because most clients are never paying me, is I don't think they have a claim. Because if they had a claim in a successful case, and it was, I guess it's an uncollectible case you may be talking about. And yes, and a lot of times we tell the client doesn't want to do it either if they're not going to collect at the end. They don't want to go through all the stress and 3 years of litigation just to get a piece of paper that says somebody owes you money. But most of the time, if it's a frivolous lawsuit, if somebody calls me and says, I'm not really hurt, but I heard I get in an accident, you can get me money. No, thanks. We turn down those cases all the time. I'm so not interested in that. I'm not interested in adding to the problem because it makes my legitimate cases so much more difficult. And I go before a jury and I have to ask these potential jurors questions like, do you hate lawyers? Do you hate personal injury lawyers? Do you think personal injury lawyers are the reason insurance rates are so high, or why you can't get homeowners insurance, or why everything's so expensive because of all these frivolous claims? Do you think it's all fraud? So this is why I would never take those cases, because it makes my real cases so much harder. And when I have legitimate clients and all my clients have real cases and real problems, I have to get over this hurdle of people thinking it's fake. Peter, to your comment you just said, I have an off-subject question. As an injury lawyer, how upset do you get to see Alex Murdaugh, and I will throw in Girardi, has done to his clients who struggled and deserve their settlement money? I want you to go watch my videos on Tom Girardi and Alex Murdaugh. I usually, as most people know, I don't like to talk bad about people or have ill will towards anybody on the show. Talking through Elaine, a lot of you guys were a lot harder than I was. I called out when I think she made mistakes, but personally, I'm very nice to people. I try to be respectful. I try to give people a lot of grace. That's something I need in my life. I know that I need more grace than I deserve. And so I try to give it. I try to treat other people how I want to be treated. But Tom Girardi and Alex Murdaugh are the people I've roasted the most on this channel because I think it's despicable, because I know the trust clients put in us. I know the power and control and decision-making power we have over clients. So many of my clients say, whatever you say, I'll do whatever you say. I trust you. You tell me, what should I do? Should I take this offer? Should I keep fighting it? And I know that if I said, let me invest your money, all this money I just got you, you trust me now, let me invest your money and actually steal it and give you just enough to where you let me keep playing with your money and spending your money and making money off your money. I know how easy that would be, and that's why I hate it. and I have just had such a tough time giving them grace. Troy Leach, Peter, have you ever thought of doing a video like this with the Mark Richard interviews? Well, Troy, I don't blame you, but if you go back on my channel and search for it, you will find it. I did a reaction to some Mark Richards interviews. I did a very interesting reaction to Binger's interview, which I enjoyed watching and listening to Binger's interview. I think it was on a podcast. So yes, please go check it out. I have done it. I agree. They were good. I think Richard's interview was good. So go check it out. Thank you, Alexandra Martinez, for the super sticker. Bev, Peter, I received a jury summons from the city of Houston for their criminal courts in 2 weeks. I intend to tweet at you throughout the entire boring morning. Well, Bev, I'm hoping and praying you get on that jury, and then we can hear about your experience. That would be after the fact, of course, not while the case is going on, but after the fact, I'd love to hear about your experience as a juror. Ashley Ducharme, hey, Peter, are you joining Brian and Jax tomorrow on the next Depo release? No, I'm just so slammed. The work's been crazy. That's why I'm doing this live so late tonight. It's just not in the cards yet, but we will do it. They've got 7 parts. I'm really hoping to do one, or at least maybe a recap at the end to talk about it. Thank you, Tori. Tamara Marie, in your opinion, how much does professional and likability factor play in a trial? I think it's important. I think it's much more important that they like the client, the plaintiff or the defendant, whoever you represent, than they like the lawyer. I think our presentation and our theatrics mean less than picking the right jury and your client's presentation. And do they believe them? Do they feel what they're saying? That's what I think is most important, because it is the client's case at the end of the day. That's who we're asking for money for justice for. Christy RN is a new member. Thank you, Christy. Deborah B. So wouldn't it be a hoot to have Johnny Depp portray you? I think he's got way too much personality to play me. That dude is hilarious. He's a quick wit, that's for sure. Alexandra Martinez, a little bit off topic and out of curiosity, what's in your playlist? Hi from Florida. Hello, Alexandra. Right now it's mostly surfaces. John Mayer, Dave Matthews. That's mostly what it is. 1,000 Hallelujahs is one of my new jams as well. It's a new song our church introduced, and I've just been kind of hooked on that as well. But you know, the go-tos are usually surfaces, good vibes only. Pooh Bear M, I need more grace than I deserve. Definitely a type A. I see you. Carlota, what are the odds for a patient if a doctor fails in their duty of care? Depends on the state, depends on the jurisdiction, depends on what it is. Med-mal is difficult. But you know, you got a chance for justice if it was a wrong that could have been prevented, for sure. Wayne Lang, our very first ever member, Wayne. Isn't that fun? Thank you for the super sticker. Asme, Peter, waiting for the Unsealed Documents Part 3. Thank you for your insights. Always a pleasure to watch your videos. This takes a little more prep than I've had recently. And I'm waiting for you all to send to me on Twitter and Instagram, @TragosLaw. Find me, follow me on there. Send me the unsealed documents you want to see, and I will break them down. Peter, listen to Johnny's Hallelujah. I'll have to do that. All right. It's bedtime, folks. Thank you, everybody who joined. Hit that like button on the way out. Subscribe if you haven't already. And tell your friends to subscribe. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you all joining me. As always, you guys make this so fun. Hopefully, everybody has a great night and a great weekend. We'll do some AMA personal stuff later. See some people asking me some music stuff. We will definitely do that because it is really fun. And I appreciate all you guys asking me those kinds of questions. So that's it for tonight. Thanks a lot.